Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Today's talk is directed specifically at men over 40 who are considering remarriage or those who have already experienced divorce and are preparing to enter a new relationship. Many people carry a quiet belief. My first marriage failed, but surely I can do better the second time. It sounds reasonable, even hope, but reality is far less forgiving. Statistically speaking, second marriages fail at a higher rate than first marriages. That is not a coincidence. It is a pattern, and like all patterns, it has a structure. The fundamental mistake most people make is this. They believe remarriage is an emotional recovery process. It is not. Remarriage is a structural integration problem, and this distinction changes everything. The structural reality of remarriage after 40. A first marriage in your 20s or 30s begins on relatively open ground. Two individuals come together with fewer entrenched systems. But remarriage after 40 is entirely different. You are not starting from zero. You are merging pre-existing life systems. Consider the variables already in place. The psychological residue of a past marriage. Children and parental responsibilities. Financial structures and assets. Ongoing relationships with ex-spouses. These are not minor details. They are active systems. When remarriage occurs, it is not simply two people forming a bond. It is two complex life architectures colliding and attempting integration. And yet, many still believe, if we love each other, everything will work out. This is perhaps the most dangerous illusion in modern relationships. Because in reality, structure outweighs emotion. Why people misjudge compatibility. In counseling settings, one phrase appears repeatedly. At first, we thought we were perfect for each other. But over time, that statement transforms into, this marriage is nothing like what I expected. Why does this happen? Because people evaluate the person, but fail to evaluate the structure they are entering. At the early stages of a relationship, emotional intensity suppresses structural awareness. Questions like these are often ignored. Does the partner have children? What is the nature of their relationship with their ex? How are finances managed? Who holds parental authority? These are not secondary concerns. They are predictors of conflict. And after marriage, these hidden structures inevitably surface. The four structural types of remarriage. Let's move from theory to classification. Remarriage after 40 can generally be divided into four structural types, each with different levels of complexity and risk. Type 1, man with children, woman without children. Moderate difficulty. The burden falls on the new partner to psychologically and practically integrate into an existing parental system. Type 2, both partners have children. This is the most complex structure. It is not a union. It is a collision of two past systems. Parenting styles, financial allocation, inheritance expectations, and ex-spouse dynamics all intersect simultaneously. Type 3, man without children, woman with children. Also moderate difficulty. The man must assume a role in a system he did not build, often facing issues of authority, emotional distance, and financial responsibility. Type 4. Neither partner has children. The simplest structure. Here, the relationship depends primarily on the compatibility of the two individuals, rather than external systems. So far, everything we've discussed is structural, but now we arrive at the deeper layer. The hidden variable, self-awareness. Structure explains risk, but it does not explain repetition, because the most critical determinant of remarriage success is not structure. It is self-awareness. Let me be precise. The greatest cause of failure in second marriages is not the complexity of the situation. It is the failure to accurately analyze the first marriage. Most people say, my partner was the problem. The situation was difficult. I was just unlucky. But these are not analyses. They are interpretations, often defensive ones. The real questions are far more uncomfortable. How did I behave during conflict? What patterns did I repeat? Why was I drawn to that type of person? What did I contribute to the breakdown? Without answering these questions, the second marriage is not new. It is a replication, a philosophical insight on repetition. There is a profound idea found in an ancient text, often misunderstood as a book about death. Its core message is this: human beings mistake their own projections for reality. And because they fail to recognize these projections, they repeat the same experiences again and again. This is not just metaphysics. It is psychology. In relationships, what we perceive in others is often filtered through our insecurities, our unmet needs, our desire for control, our fear of abandonment. But we rarely recognize this. Instead, we say, that's just who they are. In many cases, it is not. It is how we interpret them. Why we repeat the same relationships. Let's simplify the mechanism. People do not choose what is best for them. They choose what is familiar, even if that familiarity is painful. An avoidant individual will often choose another emotionally distant partner. A controlling individual will choose someone dependent. A financially irresponsible person will recreate unstable systems. Why? Because these dynamics feel psychologically normal. They are not selecting a partner. They are selecting a pattern. The critical turning point. At this stage, we encounter a fundamental question. Why do humans repeat the same mistakes? The answer is both simple and difficult, because true self-recognition is painful. To fully understand why your marriage failed, you must confront your need for control, your dependence on validation, your avoidance of conflict, your emotional volatility. This is not easy work, so most people choose a safer alternative. They externalize the cause, and in doing so, they preserve their ego, but sacrifice their future. The real purpose of remarriage preparation. If you take only one idea from this lecture, let it be this. Remarriage is not about finding a better partner. It is about dismantling your own unconscious patterns. Without that process, the outcome is predictable. Different person, same structure, same ending. Statistical data can show us structural probabilities, but it cannot show us repetition patterns. And yet, this is where most failures occur. Because what remains unchanged is not the partner. It is the internal system making the choice. So, before you ask, who should I marry next? You must ask, what in me chose the last one? That is where the real work begins. If this perspective has been useful to you, consider supporting the channel by subscribing, liking, and sharing. In the next part of this lecture, we will go deeper examining why specific personality types repeatedly choose the same partners and how to break that cycle using both psychological and philosophical frameworks. So, as we established earlier, remarriage is not determined by emotion, but by structure and preparation. But now we move one layer deeper, because even when structure is understood, many people still fail. Why? Because structure explains difficulty, but it does not explain repetition. And this is where the third pattern emerges. The third pattern, the insecure attachment repeater. This pattern is especially common among individuals with anxious or avoidant attachment styles. The anxious individual lives with a constant internal fear. I might be abandoned. So they cling. They overinvest. They seek reassurance again and again. The avoidant individual, on the other hand, operates from a different fear. I might get hurt, so they withdraw. They suppress emotion. They create distance. Now here is the critical insight. Even after divorce, these attachment systems do not disappear, because attachment is not a belief. It is a neurobiological response pattern. It lives in the nervous system, and unless the internal definition of safety changes, the individual will unconsciously choose relationships that recreate familiar emotional tension, not healthy ones, familiar ones. The three questions that determine everything. Across all repeating patterns, there are three essential questions. Why did my marriage fail? What was my contribution to that failure? If the same situation happens again, what will I do differently? If you cannot answer these questions clearly, behavior does not change. And if behavior does not change, outcomes do not change. This is why remarriage failure rates increase. A deeper lens, repetition, and human consciousness. To understand this more profoundly, let us borrow a philosophical framework. There is an ancient text that describes what happens after death, not as a physical event, but as a process of consciousness. Its central idea is simple. Consciousness follows the patterns it cannot recognize. In this framework, repetition is not caused by fate. It is caused by ignorance, not in the intellectual sense, but in the experiential sense. Failure to recognize one's own patterns. Let us translate this into relationships. If a person cannot see their own contribution to conflict, that pattern remains unchanged. And what is unchanged gets repeated. Why insight feels threatening. There is a powerful metaphor often used in philosophy. When confronted with a bright light, most people turn away. Why? Because that light represents truth. And truth, especially about oneself, is uncomfortable. To fully understand why your marriage failed, you must confront realities such as your need to control, your dependence on validation, your avoidance of conflict, your emotional reactivity. For many, this is overwhelming. So instead, they choose a softer alternative, justification. And justification is like a dim light, comfortable, familiar, safe, but it leads you right back to the same place. Psychology and philosophy say the same thing. In psychology, we call this repetition of behavioral patterns. In philosophy, it has been described as a form of cyclical existence, a return to the same conditions, shaped by unexamined tendencies. Different language, same structure, no awareness repetition. Awareness, possibility of change. Remarriage is not healing alone. This leads us to a critical correction. Many people believe remarriage is about healing emotional wounds. Healing matters, but it is not enough. Because if behavior does not change, structure does not change. And if structure does not change, the outcome remains predictable. So the real requirement is not just emotional recovery. It is behavioral transformation. 4 repeating patterns in remarriage structures. Now let's examine how these internal patterns manifest in real remarriage scenarios. Because failure rarely begins with the new partner. It begins when old patterns reappear. First, the guilt-driven father man with children. In this structure, the man enters remarriage, carrying unresolved guilt toward his children. He may say, I feel sorry for my child. I want to give them everything. So he prioritizes the child above all else. The child's demands override the spouse's needs. Financial decisions center on the child. The new partner becomes secondary. The result? The marriage is no longer centered on the couple. It is centered on guilt. And if in the first marriage, this man avoided conflict or replaced emotional communication with responsibility, that same pattern continues. Second, the divided family both have children. Initially, both partners say, we are one family now. But when conflict arises, something instinctive happens. Each parent defends their own child. Suddenly, the family splits into 2 sides. This is not just parental instinct. It is psychological identification. The child is experienced as an extension of the self. So criticism of the child feels like a personal attack. If in the first marriage conflict led to blame and division, that structure is recreated here. Third, the validation-seeking mother woman with children. This structure carries a different emotional core. The woman often holds an unspoken expectation. He must fully accept me and my child. But this expectation can become excessive. If the new partner disciplines the child, it may feel like rejection. If he remains distant, it may feel like lack of love. At the center of this dynamic is the need for validation. If the first marriage lacked recognition or respect, the second marriage becomes an attempt to compensate. But compensation creates pressure, and unmet expectations turn into resentment. Fourth, the idealized romance. No children. This appears to be the simplest structure. No children, fewer external variables. But here lies a different risk. Idealization. Statements like, "This time is different. We're perfect for each other. This is a deeper love." At first, everything feels intense and extraordinary. But reality eventually enters. Financial differences, lifestyle habits, value conflicts. And when the ideal collapses, the partner becomes a source of disappointment. Often these individuals experience the same trajectory before. Intense, beginning, rapid emotional decline. The issue is not the partner. It is the pattern of investing in emotion without evaluating reality. The unifying conclusion. All four structures appear different, but they share one underlying question. How did I respond to conflict in the past? And has that response changed? Remarriage offers a new opportunity, but without behavioral change, it is simply a new stage for the same performance. The core principle. Let me condense today's message into one sentence. It is not whether your partner has children that determines your future. It is whether your behavioral patterns repeat. The moment you understand this, remarriage stops being a risk and becomes a path to maturity. 3 critical red flags before remarriage. Before we conclude, let me give you 3 warning signals. They sound like confidence, but they are often predictors of repeated failure. I did nothing wrong. My ex was the problem. This time will be different. If the cause is always external, the solution will also be external. But marriage is not determined externally. It is determined internally by how you respond under pressure. Changing your partner does not change your life. Changing your response patterns does. If those patterns remain invisible, they remain in control. And if they remain in control, the ending does not change. If this lecture has given you a new perspective, consider subscribing, liking, and sharing this video. In the next session, we will move into practical territory, how to identify early warning signs in dating, and how to design a remarriage structure that minimizes risk. Thank you.